All right. So this week with me is Josh Alletto, which he is on the Chicago campus with me. And his background, in fact, is as a English professor, as I seem to recall.
You recall
So,
correctly, sir.
so how'd you get into that?
Get into being an English professor?
Hmm.
Well, I was a creative writing major in college and or for grad school, and in the course of being a writing major, I started tutoring a little bit,
Hmm.
and then from there, my school actually offered quite a bit of training for teachers. They were pretty good, or I don't know if it was good or bad. Maybe now I think it was bad, but they would hire a lot of their grad students for to teach the like intro classes and stuff. And so I was
Yeah.
like lucky enough to get in on that, and that's just kind of how I got started. And then I graduated. I just kept teaching.
Yeah. How many years were you teaching for?
Uh, at the college level, 6, I think.
Wow.
6 or 7, yeah. Yeah, I started really young. I started way too young, like
Yeah.
way too young. I think I was 25 when I started.
Oh
Uh,
my God.
yeah,
Yeah.
which was too young. My students are 18, 19. I'm only like 5 years older than them.
I think actually
It
my
was weird.
English teachers in college were in the same boat.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think it's a good idea.
Pro tip: don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. And I don't think colleges should hire 25-year-olds. But I don't know.
Don't tell them
Yeah,
that. Actually, that's really funny. Thinking about that, the music class I taught at the college level, I was wait, how old was I? I was 26.
yeah,
Wait, was I 26? Yeah, like 25, turning into 26. Oh my God!
yeah.
But you know
It's young,
what?
man.
I was really into teaching, so like I
Oh,
brought a
I
lot
was
of
really into it.
energy, maybe not as much experience, but a lot of enthusiasm.
I guess you got to start somewhere,
That's
right?
crazy.
Yeah.
I just realized the AC unit is on in my living room, so I'm just going to quickly turn it to a quieter
Okay.
mode, just in case like there's like this hiss. We can't tell right now, but we'll know after. All right, now it's just like a quiet rumble watching in the background. Okay, so yeah, so what got you into coding specifically as the new trajectory?
Yeah, that's. I wish I had a complete answer to that. I'm not really sure why I started. Um, I like one day got it into my head, like, I wonder how coding works.
Oh,
That was it. Like I mean, this was like maybe 3 years ago or 2 years ago. And I knew a couple people who were developers, and I was just like, how do you even get started, you know? And they were all like, well, you have to learn HTML. You can't do anything before you learn HTML. So
really?
yeah, so I did a couple because everything's web based now, right? So I mean, technically you can learn to code without knowing HTML, but I think that the reason that was their immediate response was the people I was talking to were web developers, and I think that when they thought of making something with code, they were pretty instantly thinking about doing it on the internet.
Yeah.
And maybe, like now I kind of know like that's why they were like, you have to do HTML. I wish I had known that at the time, because then I started looking at HTML and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. This isn't exciting though. Like, you know what I mean? I was like,
That's
so,
true.
so I was like, no,
Absolutely true.
there was something empowering about like learning about it and writing a few
Yeah.
like super simple HTML documents. And it actually was enough of it was intriguing enough that I kept, I wanted to keep going. That I was like, all right, fine. Now I'll look at what CSS is. Hated that even more than HTML, but like, I was like, that's fine because JavaScript is right around the corner now. So then I have a feeling I'm going to really like JavaScript. And so
Did you?
I did like JavaScript.
Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta
Well,
learn more.
JavaScript was like the first. JavaScript was before I had ever even really done anything with Ruby or even attempted Ruby, right? So it was just the first thing I wrote where it was like, oh, like there was logic. You were applying logic, and so that was very exciting right away. I mean, obviously the syntax was kind of frustrating to work with, and then especially when we started doing Ruby, you were like, oh, it could be even easier. But yeah.
How far did you get in the JavaScript? Because like we have not talked about this at all. I didn't realize.
Well, I didn't get super far, and I haven't done it since we started boot camp, like except for the very small amount
Yeah.
that we've done. But before I mean, I had very, very tiny Intuit. Like anybody who has been coding for any specific amount of time will know how naive this is. But I could write loops. I could make an object, and like had experimented with that. And I think I had told you before. I had discovered this JavaScript library called P5, which is like supposed to be sort of like a sketchbook. They call it like a sketchbook for programmers, right? And so it's very immediate, like because you're drawing a lot of shapes and stuff in the browser, and you can draw pictures and you can animate all stuff you can do with vanilla JavaScript, but you could just do it much more easily and much more quickly, and with a little bit more of a visual leaning with this library. So that was probably like the big oh, this seems useful and fun and cool, and I had been doing exercises with that for about a year, but again, just on and off because I was teaching all the time, and so on the weekends. Was
before you applied to DBC, or
before I even looked
about doing it.
Yeah, before I even looked, which I'm glad because I feel like I got deep enough into it to know the frustration of it and the kind of joy of it, which I think you got to know both, right? I think going in, that prepared me. When you would hear people in the boot camp say how hard it's gonna be and how confusing it might be at times, but how rewarding it was gonna be. I felt like I had already had a tiny taste of that, just pushing it on my own a little bit. And there are so many good getting started resources on YouTube. I don't think even in the last 2 weeks, and you could probably attest to this, we've learned more than I even imagined I would learn, period, in the boot camp. So I can't say enough about this, but I'm really glad that I at least made a little bit of an attempt to get started before I joined the boot camp, because I think I would have been even more lost. I already kind of knew about objects and methods and loops and stuff like that.
That's funny actually, because I think, including myself, 2/3 of the people on the show have had no real exposure to coding before doing DBC.
Really?
Yeah.
But you hadn't written anything or looked up anything?
Well,
that's not bad. I'm not saying.
Yeah. No.
Obviously, you're doing fantastic without it.
Thanks, Ed. No, I started prepping a few months in advance of starting the program.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of coding itself, I think I had attempted an HTML book when I was on the road and I was 24, and that sucked. I got half a chapter in. That did not work for me as a learning strategy.
Yeah.
And then I did Treehouse. I did, God, I don't even remember. I feel like I got through maybe half a course, and it just kind of, but I was also working 60 hours a week at the time.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on doing coding at that point. I was just freelancing. I'm oh, well, I'll start exploring this a little bit.
Totally.
But yeah, I don't know. My dad had me do a lot of puzzle solving when I was a kid. I really got into Sudokus. You and me were talking about when we were watching Poke, and you're oh, this sounds like a whatchamacallit, if else kind of chain, a logic chain. When I was breaking down, okay, well, if the person bets here, then do this, and then on the next street you do this, based on everything's happened up until that point. And so I'm used to thinking that style, and that's probably, I did not realize how much that helped me until you commented on that. But something you brought up is that coding is both really enjoyable, but it's the frustrations of coding, and the challenges. So that's a great lead-in. How hard is DBC?
How hard is DBC?
Now that we're actually on campus.
So I think the first week, actually, I don't know. I'm trying to think of how to answer. That's a hard question.
Okay. Let's talk about week one, because I had originally wanted to record then. What is it? The bowels of despair. Whatever the expression is, the pit of despair.
The pit of despair. That's what you're going to call week one?
Well, I really loved it. But that, I just mean everyone, I think. Oh, okay. Real quick, we can talk about this a little bit now. So DBC, one thing they do really great is you have both support groups where there's 2 people you check in with every morning. You're just oh yeah, happy morning, guys. And then if everyone's showing up late, you tell the other people in your group, and then they tell teachers. But more importantly, we also have support group on Fridays,
on Fridays,
which is a mix of phase 3, phase 2, and phase 1 students.
Yeah.
The first session at the start of each phase, there's also a teacher that also participates, or someone that works there. And basically, you all just get a couple minutes and you talk about how you're doing. And that's usually like the moment where everyone has permission to vent about everything that is stressing them out, or they're like mildly upset about, or really upset about. And we can all talk about our anxieties and insecurities. And it's a
special place.
It's amazing, actually, like that, how cathartic that is.
Yeah. Do people in your group vent a lot?
Oh yeah.
Have they been? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like actually, I think even there was a phase 3 student before they had the older students kind of like a couple of them go before any of the phase 1 people did, but then we just like go around the circle.
Mm-hmm.
And what the phase 3 student talked about was you spend all this time learning to build these things from scratch in Ruby during phase 1, and then like and maybe even partway in the phase 2, and then they started doing Ruby on Rails. And all of that is streamlined, and you don't actually have to build any of it.
Oh, really?
So,
oh man,
which is kind of like for people that are in phase 0 that will be, there is an assignment where you build all these methods, like object methods, from scratch. And I forgot
Wait, did we do that in week 1, or did we do that?
That was in Ruby. So that would have been like week.
Or not week 1. I'm sorry.
Week 1 of Ruby, you mean?
Did we do that in phase 0? I thought
we did that. We did that in phase 0.
Okay.
Or there was an assignment like that, like zombie apocalypse. But wait, how are you going to sort these supplies?
Right.
Using the sort method.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You built a sort method.
Those were valuable exercises.
They were great. Though. They were great. But
they were frustrating.
Yeah, the person's frustration though, what they were sharing about was they're like, it was the same equivalent where someone's like, oh, there's a method for that.
Yeah.
All these complicated database things, or like all this stuff in Ruby classes. And what they said was like, they understood, it was great they learned how to build them and how it all works, but they also had they kind of had a deep anger when that week started of like, oh, this is how you do it all in 2 seconds without all the like blood, sweat, and tears.
Well, I'm looking forward to that moment.
Yeah. And people, it's great. People are like really vulnerable in our session. But so while we're talking about support group, the contrast between week 1 and week 2 for the phase 1 students was like night and day. I mean, even just talking with you and everyone else and hanging out. And this is gonna be a lot of our topics today. Is almost not the curriculum. It's like sleep, time boxing, prepping food, or just like food in general as a topic. All these things, recharging, because it's so hard to strike that balance. I think that's part of the struggle the first week is you don't have a routine yet. You're figuring it out. And time boxing, just learning the time box. So at least to me, like the end of week 1 was, I was driving myself too hard. Like I got between 4 and 6 hours of sleep every night during the week. And it's like I'd wake up at 7 a.m. every day, go to campus. You were much better about getting sleep than I was.
Yeah, I had
that week. I'll say.
I don't want to throw off your theme here of week 2 being a little bit easier than week 1, but I kind of had the opposite.
That's interesting.
A little bit, yeah. Like I mean, week 1 was hard, and like it was all the things you said. Like you're still trying to feel it out, and they throw what you later figure out. What I later learned are some of the hardest challenges they're going to throw at you.
That's true.
In week 1, right? And you feel kind of like, is this even possible to solve? And it's pretty overwhelming. But for whatever reason, this week, the first couple of days of this week were the hardest for me. And maybe it was I carried my burnout from week 1 into week 2, or I don't know what it was, but it was, I think I finally started feeling like, and we took the assessment too. Felt a lot of pressure about the assessment. So yeah, I don't know. That's what I have to say about
Actually, are you willing to talk about your checkpoint
I'll talk about
experience?
my freak out with the checkpoint.
Okay, yeah, and real quick, actually, we're talking about the next week is the week 3 assessment. We're on break right now for a week because of July 4th, but the week 2 they have a checkpoint, and the purpose of the checkpoint is to make sure that everyone is on course to pass the assessment. And if you're not keeping up, that's their chance of like trying to sort of correct course rather than just like throwing it at you and be like, oh, well, you didn't do it. All right.
Right.
That's it. Repeat. No. But yeah, no. But I think Josh, I think your experience is actually really potentially helpful for other people, especially if they have a similar feeling going in.
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, I didn't expect it. I've been pretty much, I mean, despite what I said before, I've been pretty much staying on top of everything, getting most of my work done. And even doing a little bit of extra stuff. But then we sat down on Wednesday this week. We just came in the morning, we all checked in, and then we went to our computers, and like by yourself, you had to open this assessment.
Yeah,
and then
importantly, don't talk about what's on.
I will not talk about what's on the assessment. I will not mention what's on the assessment.
Other than we'll say would be things that you study in baseline. But yeah.
Well, sorry. I'll tell my horror story, but then I'll try to like add some advice so no one else has to deal with it without revealing what's on the test.
I think what you did is just
you just toughed it. I just toughed it out, man.
Not really. Like
you just take a breath and you reassess and you say like, I don't know, you got to do something. Like okay. So anyway, let me tell like what actually. So we opened it and we had done solo stuff. We've been pairing. We've been doing work, and like this was the first time I opened the file, and it's like a half. Well, I don't want to say too much about it, but there's some code in the file. That's all I'm going to tell you. There's some code in the file, and then you add more code. And I was looking at the code that was already in the file, and I couldn't understand any of it. I was like, and it was all stuff we had learned the last couple weeks, and I was like, this is gibberish, man. This is a joke. I felt like I was in like a Twilight Zone episode. And I had I was telling you, I had this really real feeling of just get up and leave. Like
leave and never come back, right?
Just leave and don't come back. Like just get on I saw myself like leaving, picking up my bag. No one would even notice because everyone was so into their shit. I was like, I'll just walk right by everybody. Because it felt like a lot of pressure. You had a certain amount of time to do it, and these are good things that I think that they're building us up to. Because even in phase 0, there are a couple of timed assessments, and they're never unfair. It's never do this unfair amount of work in this unfair amount of time, but you do feel the time pressure, and that's certainly something that you're going to feel on a job. And so I felt the pressure of like trying to get it done in time, and I think what felt so insurmountable, it was like I didn't understand it right away. And I was like, God, by the time I figure out what all this code means, I will have lost all this time, right? Yeah. So I guess what really saved me was I was like, well, I'm wasting a lot of time freaking out about not having enough time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even if at the end of this, I understand this code, even if I didn't write any other new code, that's more than I did. That's more than I would have done just panicking and leaving. Yeah. And so that was like a good way to like get grounded. I also took a step away from it, drank some water. I mean, we could talk more about that stuff too. Like, but it's kind of incredible how much like being like aware of your own body and anxiety and emotions when you're trying to learn. I don't think this is even connected so much to code as it is to being in like a high stress learning environment where you're trying to like solve a lot of problems and gain a bunch of knowledge all at once. It's intense.
Yeah. And actually one of our, I think it was part of engineering empathy, or it might've just been like a general class the first week about being at DBC and learning, is they talked to us about the learning zone, which is like in between the comfort zone and the panic zone. Like comfort zone is when there's nothing you need to do in a day, or like just very low stress, no commitments, no obligations. Whereas panic zone is like when that's like when everything goes wrong in your life at the same time, or you're given like 4 hours to do 10 hours worth of work.
Right.
Like and it puts you emotionally in this feeling of panic. I'm really paraphrasing and really not giving this concept the full justice of
I think
it.
you're doing fine.
I'm just trying to summarize it very briefly. So when you're in the panic zone, that's not really good for learning. When you're in the comfort zone, you don't really have that motivation, and you're not challenging yourself really. So that's not good for learning either. So the learning zone is like right in the middle where you are getting challenged, but you're not panicking. You're
Right.
still like emotionally together. You're able to focus, and you do feel you can feel some pressure. That's the other thing. These levels are different for everybody.
Yeah.
Like one person's learning zone would be someone else's panic zone, or
Totally.
vice versa. But it's like with the checkpoint, I think it's funny because how I started out without talking about what's on it is, as you mentioned, there's already some code there. And I looked at that, but I also sat back and thought about the problem of what we were solving or building. Like before I even started looking at what they were asking us to do, there's just a description of what it was going to do, like in the summary. And so I just kind of thought of it that way. But I think actually one thing that's helping me out, or I have an easier time when I think of cores or challenges as puzzles that need to be solved, rather than like the really hard work, because it's not always fun, but it keeps it more playful, I guess. And like how do you fail when you're solving a puzzle? Like you're just like, okay, that's not a corner piece, my bad. Like, let's put that over there. So you said week 2 is a little bit harder for you. Real quick, going to my experience, I guess.
Yeah.
I think week 2 was easier for me than week 1, because week 1 I killed myself to do all of the cores.
Yeah.
And I had I had a very freeing experience on Friday where I missed half a core, and I was like, all right, my perfect streak is over. It's done, and I could just let it go. And I've pretty much been keeping up with the work, but week 2, and actually it's funny, one of the teachers was like, nice, when he heard about like why I hadn't finished one of the cores or half a core. Was like week 2, I actually went to the gym in the middle of the week.
Yeah, good for you, man.
I had like half a core left, and I was just like, I'm going to the gym. I want to get a full night's sleep for once. And I did not finish that half a core. I got all the prep done. But having a more balanced, you still need to be learning this stuff. I think even if you don't complete cores, you still want to really like internalize them.
You should read every core through every day, for sure. I mean, I think I've attempted like 95% of them. I've at least made an attempt at. There were maybe 1 or 2 that I didn't actually write code for, but even those, every night before I went to bed, I would at least read what they were about, what they were trying to get at, just to know, like, oh, even if I don't get this concept right now, this is an important concept that might come up later.
They also, just so future students know, they also give you prep work to do every night.
Yeah.
But you know what? No, like if you do the prep work, it does make the work much easier.
No, it's super. I should have been like, I wasn't dissing the prep work. I was just like, oh my God, I forgot there's also a shitload of other work to do on top of these cores.
Yeah, and I usually do the prep work in the morning. Like I'll glance at it. Yeah, I'll glance at it the night before just to be sure I have enough time to do it in the morning. But I'm so fried at the end of each day. I'm just not in a place. Or if I did like stay up learning it, I feel like I wouldn't fall asleep, and then I'd lose hours of sleep.
Yeah.
So this is the other difference for me, at least, between week 1 and week 2, and we've talked about this a bit, is time boxing.
Yeah.
And strategizing time. And even the teachers were like, everyone started talking about like, I started making an effort to pace things better, which for people that have already started, they're already going to be familiar with time boxing, and that with phase 0, they say, like, figure out how much time you're going to put on this one release, and if you hit like an hour or 30 minutes, just kind of move on and come back to it. It's trickier to do that on campus because you have like between 4 and 8 things to do every day, maybe even 10, I guess, if you count like prep. And so it's not like, oh, I'm going to take a break and do this tomorrow. You still have to do it that day.
Right.
Which makes, I think, time boxing harder emotionally. And I was worse about taking breaks because of that. Yeah. But what started making a huge difference in terms of sleep for me is, and I would initiate this with my partners. I'm like, okay, let's look at everything we have to do today and make a plan.
Yeah.
Or usually it's like before lunch, I'll be like, let's look at the first half of what we have to do. And just based on how long it looks everything's going to be, we say, okay, we're going to do this release in 40 minutes. Or like we're like 20 to 30 minutes on this one, hour long on the big one. And even if you don't hit those deadlines, it gives you a natural check-in point where you're like, are we still making progress?
Right.
Or are we just totally should we just move on? Like, are we just like dragging in the dirt or the mud, I guess?
Yeah.
And that's part of why I slept a lot better week 2. Even this is the other thing I screwed up week 1. And okay, people should learn from my mistakes. Week 1, I was more tired Monday morning than I was Friday night. I screwed up that weekend.
Oh,
like no, because like
you mean the weekend before week 1?
The weekend after week 1.
Oh, the weekend after week 1.
Because we get weekend work, but there's a few things I didn't do right. I would really stress to everyone, pick a day to not go on the campus.
Yeah.
Like I was so fired up because I watched people like talk about like, oh, I crushed this boot camp. I was in there like 12 to 15 hours every day and every day of the weekend. And I was there all day on Saturday and I got nothing done, except helping set up Sudoku for my group.
Yeah.
And group, that's another topic to go into. But then Sunday, me and Josh got together. This was the half a core I missed. And I think you and me and Richard are the only people that did it. We solved the snake search.
Oh, so just does everybody know what that is?
No, they don't.
Okay. Well, you should tell them.
Okay, fine. We can tell them. So you have word search puzzles. This is a real world thing. But instead of using the power of the human brain, you're like, I'm going to code.
Which is useless.
We're going to code this machine to do it. Like, well, I guess it's faster once you code it. It just takes longer to code than it would be to solve the puzzle.
Right.
And the initial part of the assignment, which a lot of people also really weren't nailing, was sorry, I shouldn't say that. That came off kind of judgy. I just mean a lot of people only did half of the first release.
Yeah, and originally I had only done half of the first releases. In fact, you know what? Originally I had not even done the first half. I think I had finished half of the first half and not finished it. That was a long day that day.
That was a long day. That's true.
But anyway, go ahead.
Ruby Racer. Yeah. But with the word search, so the initial releases, you have to find a straight line version of a word in a word search. So that's your diagonal, your row, and your columns. You're checking. Hint. And actually, no, I'll throw this out for listeners because this was my comment to you when you're like thinking about the diagonal. I'm like, how many points do you need to make a line?
Yeah.
You need 2. Anyway, but and my advisor, he told me I did really good because I showed him the algorithm I wrote for that before I actually wrote it, because that's when they have paired meetings with your advisors each week, which is great. Sign up, do it. You learn a lot, and you just kind of come in with whatever questions you have. At our school, we also have an option of doing that with our peers. And again, it's like open, talk about whatever you want.
Yeah.
I have not signed up for the peers one, but I'm going to starting this week because that's pretty cool. So the snake search is, rather than solving a straight line, you just have to, it snakes through the puzzle. Like you go up and then, oh wait, that's up and then right and then left, up, right, diagonal, left, right, I'm visualizing what I'm saying now. Like I was like the first two things I said don't
Essentially,
work.
you're just finding a word anywhere in the puzzle as long as the letters are connected in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Right? To each other,
so
right?
me and Josh spent 5 hours on that Sunday building it because we each had like half of the puzzle solved or half of the building of it worked out. And that was a lot of fun. So it's funny because we showed it to one of the teachers yesterday, and looking at our code from 5 days ago was so painful.
Yeah. It's insane how much more you know just about easier way to do things, but also about like week 2 becomes a lot more about how to organize your code and how to really write reusable, like the very, very beginning of writing reusable and like scalable classes and methods and stuff like that. Which it's amazing. So, and I'm sorry, did I cut you off when you were saying that? But I think this is what maybe you were leading up to, which is just like, it's amazing how much we learned in 5 days. Like we wrote it on Sunday, we showed it to a teacher on Friday. And in that time, like we would have done it maybe completely differently, or at least organized it completely differently.
Yeah. Like I think the algorithm was strong that we came up with.
Yeah, for sure.
And, especially for beginner students.
We're awesome.
We're awesome. Yeah. In conclusion. And the podcast.
Yeah, that was the whole point. It's just a pat ourselves on the back.
Walk away undefeated.